In recent years, the landscape of education has undergone a significant transformation, with increasing calls for reform in assessment practices. Traditional grading systems, long considered the backbone of academic evaluation, are now being critically examined for their efficacy in truly reflecting student learning and growth. As the world evolves into an era that demands not just knowledge, but also adaptability, critical thinking, and practical skills, the limitations of grade-centric assessment become increasingly evident. This shifting paradigm has paved the way for competency-based assessment, CBA, which seeks to place learning outcomes at the forefront, emphasizing what students can demonstrably do rather than how well they perform on standardized tests or assignments. The movement from grades to learning outcomes is not merely a procedural change. It represents a philosophical reorientation of education's core purpose, equipping learners for real-world success. The traditional grading system, rooted in centuries-old educational models, typically relies on numerical or letter-based scores to summarize a student's performance over a given period. While this approach offers a straightforward means of comparison and reporting, it often fails to capture the complexities of individual learning journeys. Grades can be influenced by factors unrelated to actual mastery, such as attendance, behavior, or even subjective teacher perceptions. Furthermore, the pressure to achieve high marks can foster a culture of competition rather than collaboration, encouraging surface learning and rote memorization at the expense of deeper understanding. Students may focus on what will be on the test rather than developing meaningful, transferable skills. In such an environment, the true purpose of education, to nurture lifelong learners capable of adapting to a rapidly changing world, can be overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of grades. Competency-based assessment emerges as a response to these challenges, advocating for a model where the demonstration of specific skills, knowledge, and abilities forms the basis of evaluation. At its core, CBA is grounded in clearly defined learning outcomes, which articulate what students should know and be able to do upon completion of a course or program. These outcomes are derived from real-world competencies, ensuring that assessments are relevant and aligned with the demands of contemporary society and the workforce. Unlike traditional assessments, which may reward short-term recall, CBA emphasizes sustained performance and the application of knowledge in authentic contexts. The focus shifts from, did the student get an A? To, can the student effectively analyze, synthesize, and apply what they have learned? One of the most compelling arguments for competency-based assessment is its potential to personalize learning, because CBA requires students to demonstrate mastery of each competency before progressing. It inherently accommodates individual learning paces and styles. This stands in stark contrast to the one-size-fits-all nature of traditional grading, where students advance regardless of whether they have fully grasped the material. In a competency-based system, learning is not bound by arbitrary timelines. Instead, it becomes a continuous process tailored to each learner's needs. This approach not only supports struggling students by providing additional time and resources, but also challenges advanced learners to move beyond the curriculum at their own pace. The result is a more inclusive, equitable educational experience that recognizes and values diversity in learning. Moreover, competency-based assessment fosters greater transparency and accountability in education. By making learning outcomes explicit, students gain a clear understanding of what is expected of them and what they need to achieve. Teachers, in turn, are better equipped to design instruction and interventions that directly target these outcomes. Parents and stakeholders can more easily interpret student progress, moving beyond ambiguous grades to concrete evidence of learning. This clarity reduces misunderstandings and aligns the efforts of all parties involved in the educational process. Furthermore, the emphasis on demonstrable skills ensures that students are not only acquiring knowledge, but also developing the ability to apply it in meaningful ways, a critical requirement in today's knowledge economy. The implementation of competency-based assessment, however, is not without its challenges. Transitioning from a grades-focused system to one centered on learning outcomes requires a fundamental shift in mindset for educators, students, and institutions alike. Teachers must develop new assessment tools and strategies that accurately measure competencies, often moving away from traditional exams toward performance-based tasks, portfolios, and real-world projects. This shift demands significant investment in professional development and ongoing support, as educators learn to design, deliver, and evaluate competency-based experiences effectively. Additionally, institutions must reconsider policies related to progression, reporting, and credentialing, ensuring that they align with the principles of CBA. Another critical consideration is the need for reliable and valid assessment measures. Competency-based assessment relies heavily on the accurate judgment of student performance against established criteria. To ensure fairness and consistency, rubrics and scoring guides must be carefully developed, clearly articulating the levels of proficiency required for each competency. This process can be complex, particularly when assessing higher-order skills such as critical thinking, creativity, or collaboration, which may not lend themselves easily to quantification. Ongoing calibration among educators is essential to maintain objectivity and avoid subjective biases. Technology can play a supportive role here, offering digital platforms that streamline assessment, track progress, and facilitate communication among stakeholders. Despite these challenges, the benefits of competency-based assessment are increasingly recognized across educational settings. In K-12 education, schools adopting CBA report greater student engagement, motivation, and ownership of learning. Students are empowered to set goals, monitor their progress, and seek feedback, fostering self-regulation and metacognitive skills. In higher education, competency-based programs offer flexible pathways for diverse learners, including working adults, who can leverage prior learning and experience to accelerate their studies. Employers, too, stand to gain from graduates who possess verifiable skills and are ready to contribute meaningfully in the workplace from day one. The shift from grades to learning outcomes also aligns with broader trends in global education policy. International organizations such as UNESCO and the OECD advocate for educational systems that prioritize 21st century competencies, communication, collaboration, problem-solving, and digital literacy over mere content acquisition. As economies become more interconnected and technology-driven, the ability to adapt, innovate, and learn continuously becomes paramount. Competency-based assessment provides a framework for cultivating these attributes, ensuring that learners are prepared not just for exams, but for life. A key feature of competency-based assessment is its emphasis on formative feedback. Unlike summative assessments, which provide a final judgment at the end of a learning period, formative assessments are ongoing and designed to inform both teaching and learning. Through regular constructive feedback, students gain insight into their strengths and areas for improvement, enabling them to take ownership of their development. This iterative process encourages a growth mindset, where mistakes are viewed as opportunities for learning rather than failures to be penalized. Teachers, meanwhile, can adjust instruction in real time, addressing misconceptions and supporting students as they work toward mastery. The result is a dynamic, responsive learning environment that prioritizes continuous improvement over static achievement. The role of technology in supporting competency-based assessment cannot be overstated. Digital tools and platforms offer powerful means of tracking student progress, managing portfolios, and facilitating personalized learning pathways. Adaptive learning technologies can diagnose gaps in understanding and recommend targeted resources, while e-portfolios allow students to curate evidence of their competencies over time. Online simulations and virtual labs provide opportunities for authentic, performance-based assessment in disciplines ranging from science to the arts. Moreover, technology enables greater collaboration and communication among teachers, students, and parents, breaking down barriers to engagement and support. As educational institutions increasingly integrate technology into their practices, the potential for scalable, data-informed, competency-based assessment grows ever more promising. However, the successful implementation of CBA also raises important questions about equity and access. While the model holds promise for addressing disparities in educational outcomes, care must be taken to ensure that all students have the resources and support necessary to succeed. This includes access to qualified teachers, appropriate technology, and culturally responsive curricula that reflect the diverse backgrounds and experiences of learners. Assessment tasks must be designed to minimize bias and accommodate a range of abilities, languages, and learning styles. Furthermore, educators must be vigilant in monitoring for unintended consequences, such as increased anxiety or the narrowing of curricula to only those competencies that are easily measured. Ongoing research, evaluation, and dialogue are essential to refine practices and uphold the principles of fairness and inclusion. Another dimension of the shift toward competency-based assessment is its impact on teacher practice and professional identity. Moving away from traditional grading requires educators to rethink their roles, not simply as transmitters of knowledge, but as facilitators of learning and coaches for skill development. This transformation can be both empowering and daunting, as teachers navigate new pedagogical approaches and assessment methodologies. Professional learning communities, mentorship, and collaborative planning become vital supports in this transition, providing spaces for reflection, experimentation, and shared growth. As teachers become more adept at designing competency-based experiences, they are better positioned to inspire curiosity, creativity, and resilience in their students. For students, the move to competency-based assessment can be transformative, fostering a sense of agency and responsibility for their own learning. When students understand the competencies they are expected to master, they can set meaningful goals, monitor their progress, and seek targeted support. This self-directed approach cultivates habits of lifelong learning, preparing students to navigate complex challenges beyond the classroom. Moreover, by focusing on evidence of learning rather than arbitrary grades, CBA helps to build confidence and motivation, particularly for those who may have struggled in traditional systems. Students come to see themselves not as good or bad students based on grades, but as capable learners on a journey of growth and discovery. At the institutional level, the adoption of competency-based assessment requires systemic change. Policies and structures must be adapted to support new models of teaching, learning, and reporting. This may involve revising graduation requirements, redesigning transcripts to reflect competencies rather than courses and grades, and establishing mechanisms for recognizing prior learning. Collaboration with external partners, such as employers and accrediting bodies, is crucial to ensure that competency-based credentials are understood and valued in the broader community. Institutions must also invest in ongoing research and evaluation to assess the impact of CBA on student outcomes and make data-informed adjustments. The broader social implications of shifting from grades to learning outcomes are profound. In a world where credentials and qualifications play a central role in access to employment and further education, the move toward competency-based assessment challenges traditional notions of merit and achievement. By foregrounding demonstrated abilities rather than abstract scores, CBA has the potential to democratize opportunity and reduce inequities. Employers, too, benefit from clearer signals about the skills and readiness of job candidates, leading to better matches between education and labor market needs. Over time, a widespread embrace of competency-based assessment could help to realign educational systems with the demands of a rapidly changing world, fostering a more agile, innovative, and inclusive society. Despite the promise of competency-based assessment, it is important to recognize that no single approach can address all the complexities of education. A balanced system may incorporate elements of both traditional and competency-based assessment, leveraging the strengths of each to support diverse learners and contexts. The key is to remain focused on the ultimate goal, fostering meaningful learning that prepares students for success in life and work. Ongoing dialogue among educators, policymakers, students, and communities is essential to ensure that assessment practices evolve in ways that are responsive, equitable, and effective. As we look to the future, the momentum behind competency-based assessment is likely to grow. Advances in technology, shifts in workforce demands, and increasing recognition of the limitations of traditional grading all point toward the need for more authentic, outcomes-focused evaluation. Educators and institutions that embrace this shift will be better positioned to meet the needs of 21st century learners, equipping them with the skills, knowledge, and dispositions required to thrive in an uncertain and dynamic world. The journey toward competency-based assessment is not without obstacles, but the potential rewards are significant. By shifting the focus from grades to learning outcomes, we can create educational environments that are more engaging, equitable, and relevant. Students will be empowered to take charge of their learning, teachers will be supported in their professional growth, and society as a whole will benefit from a more skilled, adaptable, and resilient citizenry. The challenge now is to continue the conversation, invest in innovation, and commit to the ongoing pursuit of excellence in education. In conclusion, the movement from grades to learning outcomes through competency-based assessment represents a transformative shift in educational philosophy and practice. It challenges long-standing traditions, demands new approaches, and requires the collective effort of all stakeholders. Yet the promise it holds for students, educators, institutions, and society is too great to ignore. By embracing competency-based assessment, we take a decisive step toward realizing the true purpose of education, not merely to sort and rank, but to inspire, empower, and prepare learners for the challenges and opportunities of the future.